Hello to this spring cleaning tutorial presented by Mac Software and Mac OS X Screencasts. Now that a new year has begun, you probably want to clean up some things like in your home or house and your Mac and iPhone. In this particular tutorial, we're going to explain how you can reduce the amount of junk you have on your device using freeware apps only. When cleaning up your Mac and iPhone, it is good to know what you are actually cleaning. Your iOS device is much easier to clean up from software than your Mac is, because apps can be all over the system. They live in a particular folder when they get deleted or the data is gone too. Your Mac, on the other hand, doesn't have this limitation yet. At least not yet on all apps. That means you have to do more manual looking up and knowing where stuff is in order to remove leftovers from installers and redundant files. In the next couple of minutes, we are going to explain to you how you can effectively clean up your Mac from redundant and big files and do some maintenance as well. We start with scanning for big files. There are a couple of tools that scan the hard drive and show you a representation of where big files are on your machine. Depending on which app you use, the representation is either graphical or in list form. We're going to use Grand Perspective here. You launch the app and then pick a folder to start looking for files. I'd recommend that you start with the home folder before you go to the disk level. That way it's easier to find the biggest files because first you have a narrower scope before you go to the disk level. You also have to be more careful deleting stuff from the disk as well. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, stick to the home folder. So now that the scan has finished, you see a couple of boxes. These boxes represent folders and files on your disk. The bigger a box, the bigger is the file. Hover over an item and you're gonna see some information on the bottom. In my case, this is a file in my trash and its size is about 1.5 gigabytes. We have another item here that lives in the library under application support and is called domain.sites2 and was created apparently by iWeb. This is probably the photo website that I still keep around and I occasionally update with photos for my family. You can also click on an item to make the selection permanent, and in order to delete a file, you can either do so from the application if the menu bar icon for deletion is enabled. If it's not enabled, go to the preferences of Grand Perspective and enable the deletion of files and folders. The default is nothing, so you can't actually delete stuff from the application. In order to delete files, you have to press the reveal icon and then just delete the file from Finder. After you've deleted a couple of files, just click Rescan from the File menu. You can also open the drawer on the right-hand side. The first tab gives you an overview of the entire disk. You can change the display settings, but what I really wanted to show you is the Focus tab. This gives you information about the selected item or the currently hovered item. Just click a second time on the box to get back to hover mode, and now you can see the selection follows my mouse cursor. Here we have a file in the caches folder that was created by OS X's helping system. The biggest problem actually is to figure out which files can be deleted. If you look at the library, this folder usually contains files that were created by an app in order to function. In my case, this iWeb website. So be careful deleting that data. If it is not in the library, but in your home folder, chances are very high that you've created it on your own. And you're hopefully going to be able to figure out what to do with it, whether to keep it, whether to delete it, whether to archive it. iTunes is most of the times an app that saves a lot of data in the music folder. But you don't want to delete iTunes music from the Finder, because if you go back to iTunes, it's still going to show that file. But iTunes also has some built-in functionality that help you to find bigger files. Go to the playlist section and create a new smart playlist. Here you can set to have only files of a particular size and above, for instance 5 megabytes. And then you have a playlist of files that are bigger than your set size. This way you can easier find bigger files in your iTunes library. Now let's actually go to the library. Click the Go menu in the Finder, hold down the Option key and select Library, the new menu entry that has just appeared. Generally, if you're suspicious about an item, you can always Google it. Just type parts of the name into Google and you probably find information about the thing that you just found. Maybe add Mac at the end or OS X. There's a folder in here called Caches, which you don't want to delete. The data in there is generated automatically as needed, and it is also cleaned up automatically. So you don't want to mess around with that folder. App settings are saved to the Preferences folder. If you actually go in there, don't be intimidated by the number of files. It's probably not worth your time to delete preferences, but if you really choose to do so, the best thing you can do is to go one by one. The data apps generate live now in two folders. The sandboxed ones can only save to containers. Apps that are not sandboxed write their application data generally to application support. There are exceptions though, so you may choose to manually go through the library after you've cleaned up the application support folder. In my cases, if I scroll down here, you see two folders here, Text Wrangler and TimeSync, don't save to the application support folder. So to wrap up this section, I would recommend to start by finding bigger files first with the tool described here or these tools. Then do a second scan manually in order to find smaller files that haven't been found yet. Library files you generally don't want to delete because it's just not worth your time. In any case, the library files are just there. They don't do anything bad to your system. So it's okay for them to be there unless, of course, you just have to free up some disk space. If it's real junk, you are probably more likely to find those files in your home folder and not in the library. But it makes sense to go through the library and get an overview of what's in there. Apps are a special case and desire a dedicated section. To find big apps, point Gram Perspective to scan the Applications folder, which is at the root level of your disk. The reason I'm mentioning this here is because some people have problems to let go of some of their apps. They have downloaded an app some time ago, promised themselves to do something with the app, but that thing never happened. And now they keep holding on to it. I'm doing that too sometimes. I personally prefer to do this in Launchpad, but I can see that this flood of icons can be intimidating as well. So you may do this in the Finder, in Lists, Icon, or in Cover Flow. Whatever flows your boat. At the end, you go through one app at a time, and then you need to figure out whether you want to keep it or not. Then just delete it. But remember that the data the app has generated, if it was ever launched, still lives on in the library. So you might actually want to schedule the manual walk through your library after you've cleaned out your applications. You can also use an app like App Cleaner to go through your applications. App Cleaner automatically scans for related files and offers to delete them as well. Now, here's a cool tip for you if you have problems letting go of some of the apps. I call it Out Loud Declutter. Try to find a friend and go with him or her through the apps. For every app, you need to come up with a reason why you're keeping it. I found this really helpful. Sometimes I see an app and before actually saying the reason, I suddenly realize, no, this is never going to happen, and it becomes really easy to let go and just press delete. You can use this tip on your iPhone as well, and it works for many other things too. Subscriptions and other regular expenses, books, stuff you have on your desk, etc. Before we begin with the main contents of this section, I'd like to talk about the category of tools we're going to see now. You have to be careful with the following tools. They were made to tell you about problems with your computer there are sometimes no real problems, so their usefulness is questionable. Some let you clean data that is simply not necessary to clean. I can understand the urge of some users to keep their computer clean and tidy, but in some cases it is not necessary to clean after the robot. The robot cleans after itself already. Don't expect these programs to fix hardware problems either. It is very likely they won't. Apple has created a system that cleans specific things automatically and periodically. These small programs run automatically without your assistance. You can, however, invoke them by hand using the terminal or Onyx. There are 3 scripts total: a daily one, a weekly one, and a monthly one. Here's what they do. They basically clean up temporary files and rebuild the locate and what is database you can use on the terminal. Nothing more. So there's actually no need for you to run these manually, because you're never going to see a result. So let's look at permission repair. Despite the fact that you can also do this from disk utility, there's little a repair of permissions does. Here's a support article from Apple. So all that permission repair does is to check these files and compare their current permissions with the ones they should have mentioned in the BOM. If they differ, they are repaired. Applications installed by the installer normally don't create these files, therefore their permissions aren't repaired. If you heard of someone who has had luck getting his or her computer back working because of a permission repair, it was most likely something else. If you have problems with something, you have to find the root of the problem. There are many forums out there with a lot of knowledgeable folks who know a lot about computers. You can just ask them or find a local who can help you. Let's go to rebuild. Here you can rebuild the launch services. Launch services is a technology that keeps record which types of files you want to open with which application. Launch services are also responsible for what is listed in Finder's Open With menu. Sometimes OS X lists an app more than once. This issue can be resolved by rebuilding launch services. You can also use the terminal for this. Please Google. The downside is that you may have to tell Finder again which files you want to open with which app. The DYLD shared cache is updated automatically, so you don't need to rebuild it. DS store files are invisible files created by OS X inside folders. These files contain the view settings. If you set a particular background or file order, all these settings are saved into a DS store file. So you can use this feature here to traverse through a file system to get all view settings back to their defaults. The other options are a very last resort to problems that occur seldom. If you can't find anything anymore with Spotlight, rebuilding the Spotlight index may actually fix that problem. Please check in System Preferences whether the volume you want to search is not listed under Privacy first. Mail keeps an index of its mails. If you rebuild it, Mail runs faster on older machines. Newer machines don't profit as much from an envelope reindex. Help Viewers index can be rebuilt if the help doesn't show anything or doesn't function correctly. The last option basically deletes desktop's DS store file. So let's quickly look at cleaning before we wrap up this section. You see that there are a lot of files you can choose to delete. Specifically, these are mostly cache files and logs. James Pond has a fantastic overview of what log files are and what they are for. Unless you've been told to delete them, there's no need to delete log files. They will be deleted automatically or get regenerated by your Mac anyway. The size of my log folder is about 90 megabytes, which is really not that much. If you have problems with your machine, these log files contain helpful information for developers and computer technicians, so it's recommended that you don't delete them. Caches, as mentioned earlier, get deleted and will also be rebuilt by the system as needed. In fact, you can just turn off your Mac, and when it's turned back on, it will go ahead and delete caches by itself. So if you have a problem with your Mac, a reboot could indeed do something. But there's no special tool for it. So, as a wrap up, after you scan your Home, Library and Applications folders, you are basically done with your spring cleaning. I've also been untrusting my computer for a long time, probably due to the fact that I'm using computers for a long time and they have been so unreliable in the past. With a Mac, there's actually not much to worry about, I found. My time's better invested with other things, like cleaning my desk at home, which I'm going to do now. Or tomorrow, maybe.